Welcome to Yoga for You, a channel tailored to helping you discover your very own unique yoga practice. Hello my friends, welcome to this episode of the Sagacity Spotlight. Today's guest is the Dr. Laura Cueva-Miller. She's a doctor on mindfulness. Her degree may not say that, but her life does. Today we break down mindfulness. We break down meditation, yoga, the various aspects of yoga. We talk about shame, a lot of great resources, and just general mindfulness tips, how we can begin integrating that. She's extensive in her research and her scientific understanding on the mind, and we're going to watch how those two worlds merge through this talk. I also want to let you know that unlike any other interview we've done so far, I had some significant technical difficulties during this one. Wi-Fi problems, you know how it is. So to compensate for that, I re-recorded some of my questions, and they're going to pop up with a text bit, and you're going to hear my voice. It's not going to line up, but it's going to be pretty close. It's just enough to get the message across, and you can still understand the questions. Thank you for your support, your understanding, and your love. May you enjoy this one. Namaste. Hello, my friends, and welcome to this episode of the Sagacity Spotlight. I am joined with the incredible Dr. Laura Cueva-Miller. She is a mindfulness coach and has been a licensed therapist for many, many years. She's been a psychologist for 15 years. So it's an honor to have her here and to give us a glimpse of both worlds colliding. Laura, welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm well. Good to see you, Ty.
Oh, it's such an honor to have the space to discuss who knows what comes through. What's the weather like in Riverside today?
Warm. High 90s. Warm. Yeah, but we'll have a respite apparently tomorrow and Sunday. Yeah.
Good, but
a little bit of a hint of summer.
Oh, well, good thing is you got AC down there, right? So
yeah, well, yeah.
the houses are equipped.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, it's a very general intro usually, but as I expressed to you a little bit before the call, this page, these segments are to explain what yoga is and how it affects so many people differently. So I always like to pose the general question up front. What does yoga mean to you?
It's so interesting. I started meditating in the early 90s. And I don't think really the title of yoga, that word, was part of my sense of what was going on then, but kind of in retrospect, looking at the meditation practice, I see that as definitely part of what yoga is to me. So I think of it as kind of a bigger practice in relation to, I think for a lot of people today, they think of yoga, they think of the movements. And I think of my experience with yoga is foundationally in meditation, and that it was really always and was and is a way of practicing how is it I can be in presence with my experience as it is right now. So through meditation that I first practiced, early 90s, was with the teacher Shinzen Young. He teaches Vipassana meditation, which the way he teaches it kind of different than the way I hear some people talk about it today, but very much about noticing present moment experience. And so that was much of my practice until my very first class of movement yoga, of an asana practice, 2002. In the fall of 2002, my very first asana class, I was down at the beach in Laguna and went to a class, and then had a colleague tell me about the yoga here in Riverside. And so I started practicing since then. So I was 39 years old,
Wow.
and coming up on 19 years of an asana practice. So the sense of bringing movement into a meditative practice, wanting to kind of coalesce those two things together is what I would say yoga is to me today. So I really look at kind of the moment to moment experience of the kind of the essence of being alive as the yoga practice.
You have a pretty regular practice then yourself. Do you have a daily practice still?
Yep. Some days I think I give myself Saturdays off. No, I don't, because I do this class with Scott. Some days I'll take a break and let myself, I guess when you say a yoga practice, an asana practice,
Of course.
the movement practice, I wouldn't say I do that daily, probably 5 or 6 times a week. But I try to, even if I have a single breath meditation practice on a day, which sometimes that's what it entails. So working from home these days, of having kind of the home office be, I'm here all the time because of COVID, just to give myself a single breath of awareness of, wait a second, let me settle down, give myself that sense of what's going on in this present moment in relation to what that inhale and what that exhale entails.
I love that. I love that that opens up the understanding that meditation can be a single breath.
Oh, absolutely.
That is beautiful.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people can find comfort in knowing that it doesn't have to be a 25-minute painful sit. That's exciting.
Yeah.
How did you, so which came first, the chicken or the egg? Or should I say meditation or asana?
Meditation came first. Yeah. So I started practicing meditation, like I said, in the early 90s. And not until probably 10 years later did I start an asana practice. Although, if I'm honest, in a way, I would say that, not called yoga, but my movement practice started in the early 80s. I was a student at UCR and had always wanted to practice karate. And UCR had a really intensive, extensive Shotokan karate practice. And the practice there, I loved it. Every class began with a particular invocation of kind of bringing the practice of the movement into understanding the presence of it, the connection with what these movements entail, that they be done with in an ethical manner, with dignity, with a connection to understanding your force with the body. And so I practiced Shotokan karate for 6 years. I have a brown belt. That's been a long time since I've practiced karate. So that was, I would say, my first connection to kind of noticing an embodied sense of movement. So then I took a long break from late 80s to early 90s before I started meditating regularly. And then asana came in, like I said, in about 2002.
That's
How
incredible.
did you think about those connections?
And so you're married to Scott. I want to put that out there. Scott's an amazing guest I had on the talk earlier.
Yeah.
How did you guys' paths cross? And
So they crossed in yoga. He owned Inland Yoga, and I began taking classes from one of his teachers. Her name was is GL. And it's beautiful. I was, at that time, had finished my PhD program and was working in a private practice at 2 different clinics, getting my hours to get licensed as a psychologist. And the only time I had really to practice was early in the morning. And she taught a class early in the morning. And so for about 6 months, I was more often than not her only student in the morning. And it was such a gift. So I got to learn asana from GL, and then schedules shifted and had the opportunity to meet Scott and spend more time practicing with him. And I said to him, one day after practice, he were in Shavasana, and after Shavasana, I said, Scott, have you ever noticed, anything kind of energy between the two of us? And his answer to me was, nope.
Oh, just like that.
Yep. And it's like, okay. And then we started having tea together, and here it is. We've been married. It'll be 16 years in August.
Wow.
Yeah.
How'd you crack them? What was it? Was it the tea? Did you put something good in the tea?
Nah. We used to go into the town center back when we could have tea out in public. Yeah. No, it was just kind of realizing that there were a lot of similar ideas, similar values. See the world sometimes similarly, sometimes very different.
Yes.
But there was definitely a connection. There is a connection.
That's special. That's good. It allowed maybe your inquiring allowed the space, you know what I mean? Of course, you planted the seed to some degree, and that's beautiful because it's obvious that you guys complement each other's practice and career, and it's been amazing to dance together over the years.
It is a good dance.
Yes. I want to take a step back and ask what made you want to become a marriage and family therapist? What was that call?
It was my first session in therapy as a client. So as an undergrad, I came out to Riverside to go to UCR to study business. And so I was a junior and decided to go into therapy, issues related to childhood with a narcissistic parent, or probably both parents, narcissistic, of just dealing with my own personal issues. Went into therapy, and after that first session, I said, this is what I want to do. Wow. So I went to my academic counselor and I said, I want to change my major to psychology. And they're like, no, you have this business degree. I said, no, I'm majoring in psychology. And so they said, well, just go ahead and do 2 majors then. So I have a business major and a major in psychology. And at that point, UCR doesn't have any sort of a clinical program. They're behavioral and research on animals and do stuff like that. So I knew that I had to pursue graduate school, and applied to some schools and didn't get in. I got into somewhere in Nebraska. Decided I didn't want to go to Nebraska, and ended up applying to Cal State San Bernardino late. And it was great. I got accepted into Cal State San Bernardino, but not into their marriage and family program. I took some classes. I was accepted as what do they call it? Post baccalaureate, so post BA or BS. Well, I had both BA and BS. Students, so I could take classes, and I had to fill in some gaps as a therapist. So I got to take some classes, got to meet the staff, got to meet the faculty at Cal State San Bernardino, and then I applied to their program and did my master's there. And I knew I always wanted to do a PhD program, but I also knew that I needed to have an income during that time. So finished my master's, did private practice, worked at the counseling center at UCR, and as a marriage and family therapist, and then took a couple years off from school and went back to school in 1993 and did my PhD in Los Angeles at the California School of Professional Psychology. And that took a while. Coursework was about 5 years, and took me 3 years to finish my dissertation. But then, so I was in private practice throughout that whole time. So I worked throughout grad school as a marriage and family therapist, and then did my postdoc hours and have been in private practice since 1994. Wow. I've had a private practice as a marriage and family therapist first, and then as a psychologist.
Wow. So how have you seen the benefits of, because mindfulness has been to some degree, sounds like, a part of your life fundamentally?
I'm not always mindful, I promise. I definitely have my own struggles with disconnecting from pains that are happening as they happen, and pains that maybe get triggered from past, I'll call them traumas, that take me out of my mindfulness. So I think really helping me connect to what's the reality of this moment. That's where the mindfulness has been so helpful for me, is how do I connect to the reality of what this moment is, instead of getting pulled necessarily into how a past experience might be coloring what's happening right now. So I think that the gift of noticing what's going on right now is a lot clearer when it's not shaded and shadowed by our past difficulties, our past traumas, our past experiences. Not denying them, because I think that that's a part of processing. We need to process those things, but to be able to say, okay, well, what's the reality of my experience right now? It's interesting. I'm taking a course, a training course in trauma-specific, trauma-informed mindfulness, because I think what happens is we have a lot of mindfulness practitioners and mindfulness trainings that are happening today that I guess some people call them happy mindfulness, that really tries to focus on what's happening right now, and that be the only thing we focus on, and how this present moment, all of that stuff can be, I think, contrary to helping us deal with what's happened in the past, and almost damaging. That I think some of the mindfulness practices can be damaging in relation to if there's not an acknowledgement that some people have been through trauma, and that what we can do in relation to linking mindfulness, having it be aware and, as they call it, informed by someone's trauma. And just understanding the practice of treatment of trauma today is very different than it used to be. We used to have people go through the memories and kind of re-traumatize people. How is it that we can help you to bring you, reorient you to this moment? So there's some mindfulness in it, but understanding now that our treatment, our use of mindfulness for treatment doesn't have to rekindle the memories, but that we go into the body, having mindfulness really be about the present moment experience of what is it happening in my body in relation to my experience at this moment, giving that an honoring, self-compassion, giving that a space of honoring ourselves, in that there's not a need to, okay, you need to dive into that trauma now or that experience now, but to honor is just like, you know what, I'm not ready to do that yet. Letting there be the sense of, okay, I can kind of stick a pinky into that and let that inform me of my experience, and to say, that's not something I'm ready or willing to go into. So one of the things I think that's brought, how mindfulness has informed me in relation to my work as a psychologist, has been, which is a little bit hard sometimes, working with insurance companies who pays the bills for me, pays me a lot, that there's this sense of, no, you should get the treatment done quickly, instead of saying, wait a second, we need to honor that someone can't go into what the true root of someone's difficulties might be in 10 sessions. Sometimes it takes a lot of sessions to be able to touch what's happening, honor that, and allow ourselves to establish a way to kind of reconnect to ourselves in a way. I think that's part of what yoga has a helpful practice, is that there is that, hopefully, of reconnecting to, oh, this is me in my body right now. Not, because I know some people will use yoga and practice like, no, I should be able to get into this pose in that way, or should be able to get this meditation in that way, that there's a lot of judgment. There's a lot of expectations of how we can bring our mindfulness to notice even those self-expectations, that self-judgment that goes along the way. Just, I know Scott uses the word often of kind of creating a sense of allowance, a sense of spaciousness, a sense of favorable conditions, of that all of those things can be part of our yoga practice to give ourselves the space for, I guess, healing, just reconnecting.
Yeah, big time. This will be so helpful to your clients. Just to generate the trust is so useful.
Right, that self-trust. I think that's a lifelong sort of challenge, and especially when there is childhood difficulties and childhood traumas. That it's interesting. I have to do continuing education to maintain my licensing, and did some this week, and I'm going to cheat and look at some of my notes. The gentleman I listened to, a Hungarian therapist by the name of Gabor, Gabor Mate, Mate, with an accent, and he describes the name of his book is called When the Body Says No, and it's listening to our stress and reconnecting with ourself. And I loved, he talked about, especially within the context of our childhood in these United States, talked about kind of two needs that we have as in our childhood and throughout our lives. One of an attachment, so having a caregiver, someone that cares for us, and the other of authenticity. So how is it that we can have a true expression of ourselves? And he talked about how for a lot of people, and especially in the context of this country, that there is this dilemma that children face. It's like, okay, I can have the attachment, but I don't get to necessarily have my authenticity. Or I can have my authenticity, but there's a risk of losing that attachment. So it's not, I think that people think that children make the choice of one or the other, and it's not a choice. The way he talked about it is that there really is these adaptations that we make of having to get one or the other instead of being able to have both of those needs met. So that sense of how is it that our yoga practice lets us reconnect to ourselves, and how do we trust ourselves to honor our authenticity, to give ourselves, to create the space for our self-expression, that authenticity within the context of yoga. And also, how is it we let ourselves have the attachment to others, but to ourselves as well? I mean, the meaning of yoga is that yoking, that bringing together, that connecting. So I think it's so important for us to see what sort of attachments we haven't maybe being able to establish. There's been that adaptation of how we haven't attached, connected to ourselves. So that sense of self-trust, I think, is just so huge in relation to psychotherapy and in relation to a yoga practice too. To trust myself is like, okay, wait, some days in my asana practice, my body can do weird stuff. Some days it doesn't. And to trust that it has that variability, it's a human body. It's like, today it's not going to do that, and that's okay. And that I can honestly listen and trust my body to say what makes sense and what might not make sense at this moment.
Gentleness. Can you still hear me okay? It looks like you can. I'm going to turn my camera off because it looks like I have absolutely frozen.
Yeah.
So that way we can continue this, give my camera a little bit of time to catch up, but we can still continue the discussion, because I think what you're talking on is so incredible. Because I mean, I don't know any yogi who's practiced for a substantial amount of time that hasn't experienced this. Suddenly one day, no trauma to the body, and then now it, like, my lower back is, I can't touch my toes, and I've been touching my toes for 6 months, no problem. Now I can't. What's up with that?
Right.
So it's important that to speak on the fact that, one, that exists, and two, healthy ways, right? Keyword is healthy ways to go about handling those moments when they come.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. Scott has mentioned before that Richard Freeman has described that the yoga practice doesn't start until you lose your first pose. So your body can do all sorts of things and do that, and then suddenly it can't. It's like, oh, so then what's the how do I trust myself? How do I stay connected to myself? How do I not judge myself? How do I have compassion with myself? How do I have that mindful awareness of myself to understand, oh, so this part of the journey then.
And so,
Instead of the cool, oh, there's these cool flexibilities and practices. And I'm very lucky to have long ligaments, so I can touch things. I got long arms. I can do lots of poses and practices that I know are going to go away at some point. And some of them have already. But it's a beautiful opening if we let ourselves not be hypercritical about, oh, I can't do this anymore, or even to start, oh, I can't do this. Because some people's bodies don't let them touch their toes. It just doesn't happen. Yeah. Like I said, I got really long arms, so touching the ground is kind of easy because my arms are long. Does that make me a better yogi? No, it makes me have a long armed yogi.
Yeah, I guess it just depends on how well you take the change. That's what really determines the quality of the yogi, and that's on and off the mat too.
Oh yeah, some days I don't take it so good. Some days I do. That's for sure.
How can people find information about you? Whether that is, do you offer any? I know this day and age, a lot of it's online. Do you offer any mindfulness talks online? Do you have a website, stuff like that?
So I have a Instagram that was kind of someone was helping me with before COVID, and I've kind of stalled on that. And it's something that I need to, maybe I'll ask you to help me. How is it that I can go ahead and put some more? I did some brief mindfulness talks. I think I did 2 or 3 of them with just including some mindfulness practices that people could go ahead and connect to. I think it's called mindfulness daily. It's called Daily Living Mindfulness. And then Mindfulness with Dr. Laura, I think is the name of it. So I haven't connected to it, and I really want to, and have clients telling me that I should do it, because I do mindfulness with my clients in practice. I often will do clients, I'll help them go through a body scan in session, and my clients always say, Laura, your voice is so great, please record something. And so I need help with that, and I need support and a team with that, because I believe that's the other part of mindfulness, is I don't think it's something that we can do just alone. I think it's so helpful to have resources. And I know for myself, one of the things that I rely on is, and I love that the internet has so many resources. I rely on books, and I rely on talks, and I rely on different teachers that I've had in my life, of how is it that they help support me in remembering, oh, there's that resource for me. Those are those words that I forget about and that I can access again. So I do and I don't. I'm not very active on the Instagram, but I will enlist some help so that I can do that some more.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, because I can't help but shake I don't know, I feel it, and in our talk right here, these little snippets of the little quotes that you read, that you hear, these are all so valuable, 2-3 clips. And I think that it would change, it would help make an impact on a lot of people's lives to have those digestible clips somewhere. So we'll link the connections, the pages you've listed below, so you can go and check those out, because I have a feeling maybe by the time you hear this, there'll be something there, because it just feels like your energy feels like that's where it's moving. So
yeah, and I happen to speak Spanish also. So my bilingual, my Spanish speaking clients have said, please do that in Spanish. So that's an aspect of this I need to do as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. There's no need to limit anything. I mean, we live in a time and age where, I would love to maybe have you on some talks, just some mindfulness body scans on this page, if that ever became something you'd be interested in either Spanish or English. We have Yasini on here who teaches Spanish yoga. So let's keep it going, and let's make sure we're giving everybody a fighting chance to just stay on this wave of self-love, self-exploration, giving people the tools they need to truly equip themselves for this life.
Definitely. Yeah.
I love it. So What are some of the things that you recommend to people? Are there any mini practices? I know you mentioned a body scan, but are there any things that maybe mantras or questions you ask yourself or your clients at times?
It's, I guess one of the things that I tell my clients to do, and I know with practice, is to give ourselves just a moment to check in. Just a single breath meditation is a meditation practice. I have clients that tell me, "Oh, I know I should be meditating 10 minutes a day, 5 minutes a day." I'm like, you don't even have to do that. Let there be a single breath, even 30 seconds. How is it just a few breaths to give ourselves that time and that ability to just check in? So one of the things I suggest to people is, you're at a red signal. Don't close your eyes. But let yourself notice, oh, my hands are on the steering wheel. I can see what's around me, the colors that are happening, just an awareness of what's happening at that moment. Don't go on your cell phone. Letting ourselves bring the awareness to what's transpiring at that exact moment. I think the beauty of a body scan can be sometimes just noticing a part of the body. Let me notice what's happening in my hands. Maybe I can notice that there's a sense of temperature, as I'm kind of focusing on my hands, that there's a sense of positioning of the hands. There's a sense of movement of the hands. There's a sense of just kind of fullness of the hands. Letting ourselves even just focus on a body part that's neutral. Maybe not a painful part. There's just a neutral part of the body, and just allowing ourselves to be in the presence of that for a few seconds. And so many times we are spending our brain power planning. Or, okay, the next thing I got to do, believe me, I'm a planner. Next thing I got to do, what's got to happen next? What's got to happen next? Or rehashing what happened. Why did you do that? What happened? Why was that said? Why didn't that happen?
That's a big one. That judge in your head, that's a big one.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's what the self-compassion practice these days of the mindful self-compassion is so beautiful, is to give ourselves some tools of how is it that we can go, oh, wait a second. That judgment that's happening, it's like, gosh, that's so hard. It's so hard that judging part arises. It really feels bad. It's just giving ourselves the compassion to notice when that happens, and not to necessarily, sometimes it can be helpful to just push it away, say, no, I'm not going to do that now. But sometimes it's just like, whoa, that's a practice, maybe evolutionarily established, that of how much we do that. The mind, the judging mind thing, but it's judging all the things around us, it's judging ourselves. How to have compassion for ourselves when those sorts of difficult experiences arise. It's like, whoa, that's happening again. And letting ourselves just have some space, like, wow, that's really tough. You go through that over and over again. And man, you handle that pretty skillfully some days, pretty skillfully not so much other days. Yeah, so I think that the mindful self-compassion, again, as a resource, that authors that are writing mindful self-compassion books, Kristin Neff is an amazing researcher and provider of practices in relation to that. Jon Kabat-Zinn, Jack Kornfield, I mean, all the authors that I really appreciate. Adyashanti, Eckhart Tolle, amazing books that, it's funny, I was saying to a client earlier, it's like, okay, not enough bookshelves. I got all my books, and then they're stacked on top of that. And then I bought 3 other books this week. So books of psychotherapy that I have, and books of mindfulness practices, and all sorts of resources that are out there in relation to self-love too, I think are so important, combining kind of those two worlds together.
That is important. Do you have any books, titles of self-love that you would recommend for anyone
It's
listening?
funny because I just, I don't know where I put it. I just got them in the mail. Someone recommended it. It's called The Body is Not an Apology. It's about radical self-love, and there's a workbook that goes with it of just self-love. And Kristin Neff, as I said, is an amazing mindfulness self-compassion or mindful self-compassion books. Many of Jack Kornfield's books are really just beautiful in relation to mindfulness. His book, the first one of his I read, I can't remember. You can see the kind of pinkish sort of cover of the book. A Path with Heart.
There you go.
Yeah. And our sense of, what I think what's beautiful is I like having lots of different authors, because sometimes they say the exact same thing. Pema Chödrön's books say the same things, but in different ways, in different voices. It just helps me to have the same sorts of messages come to me from different sources. It's been such a helpful part of having those resources in relation to maintaining a mindfulness practice and a self-kindness practice.
It's so important. I love that you spoke to that, because there's something magical when you get into, when you're really hooked by the line of literature and you really just ravish books left and right, and you're just absorbing, because we go through phases, right? Like anything.
Right.
Sometimes we are, sometimes we aren't, but when you are and you're on it and you recognize that so many people are saying the same things differently, but the same things, that is where the lights begin to click.
But that sense of how is it that someone's writings or someone's lectures can gel for us, maybe something that we've heard in lots of different places. Someone, as you say that, Brene Brown comes to mind. She's a researcher in shame and vulnerability. She's a social worker at the University of Houston. She has an amazing TED Talks of just seeing how is it that she talks very much making a distinction between embarrassment, guilt, and humiliation, and shame. So very different things. These things are about something I did, is about an actions, and the shame is about I'm a bad person. Not my actions were messed up or difficult, but I'm a bad person. And what we do in relation to shame, of how we get shamed in this culture, and that part of kind of the authenticity and the attachment parts of what Dr. Mate talked about, and how that comes into connection with how do we learn how to stop doing that sort of thing to ourselves? How do we stop shaming ourselves? And we can use a yoga practice to shame ourselves. Oh, I'm not a good yogi because I can't do that asana, or not a good yogi because I'm not meditating. To say, wait a second, instead of that judgment, allowing ourselves to create space for how do I want my life practice to look? Not even to look, but how do I want it to be a resource to me and to be in this world that we live in, and the suffering that we can come across in our lives? How do I want to have support to face those sorts of difficulties and that sort of suffering, and not to kind of add to it and to build on top of it, but instead to soothe it and to ameliorate it, to diminish it for ourselves.
Simple, but not easy, right?
Yeah.
But it's there, and it's there for the taking, and through simple conversations, it can be absorbed and the seeds can be sown. And so,
Yeah.
Thank you for just being on here and sharing your deep canyons of insight and knowledge. What are some things that maybe you could channel right now for anybody listening to offer any guidance?
I think gratitude is an important practice to bring in. Gratitude for this embodied experience. It's funny, I have some people that question, well, what's the purpose that I'm here? And I haven't found my purpose. And I think that that's a struggle. That's a way that we can dig a hole for ourselves. And we're looking for a purpose instead of to saying, okay, wait a second, let me have a sense of gratitude in this embodied existence. There's a short film called Gratitude or Gratefulness, I can't remember. If you put it in short film, Gratitude, Lewis, I can't remember his last name, starts with an S, but it's a beautiful film of a mindfulness practice. How is it we bring our awareness into this moment and bring gratitude? That's an aspect of a mindfulness practice that can be really helpful. One practice that in the context of positive psychology that I use some of the techniques from there to work with clients within the context of psychotherapy, but also in the context of mindfulness is, what do I let myself notice at this moment that I can be grateful for? There's light. There's this light bulb. I can turn on this lamp.
Yes.
There's a chair that I'm sitting in. There's clothing that I can open up, luckily a closet, and select, there's this shirt that I can, it's like, oh, I can have that shirt and put that t-shirt on today. That when we bring a sense of gratitude in our lives, that opens up a door for us, I think, of experiencing joy and happiness, and that it doesn't go the other way. I think a lot of people think, so well, if I'm happy, then I can be grateful. It's like, no, let me bring gratefulness into this moment. Bringing that gratitude into the moment opens us up to see what we might not be seeing, to see what it is that in this moment, maybe I have a little bit of clarity about what's happening right now. It might not be everything I want it to be, but our desires are not always the most not the most helpful thing for us to feel.
True.
Less suffering at this moment, but to notice, oh, that this moment is as it is, and there is difficulty in this moment. There is great pain in this moment. There's great suffering in parts of the world in this moment. And there's incredible beauty and incredible connection to all that stuff happening all at the same time.
It's hard to imagine, but it is reality. It's that ever-present balance.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And we can send our love to the people who need it and keep it circulating. Well, thank you so much for this. It's been an absolute honor. And
Thank you,
I would love to have you on again sometime soon, and maybe doing some of these mindfulness practices, maybe not for, whatever duration they are, shorter practices for people, but I'd like to help get these out. It's not easy. I know it's not, but you do it skillfully. So thank you for being, Laura.
Thank you so much, Ty. Be well.
Hey, everybody. Really hope you enjoyed that talk. It was beautiful to have that experience with that shared guest. We have a lot of very useful information in the description section below, so be sure to check it out. I've also linked any and all videos with that individual in the description below, so check those out as well. It's an honor to bring this footage to you, and I hope you can come back and continue to deepen your practice. Namaste.